Hi, and welcome back to another episode of That Inner Voice podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer McKenzie. I'm a somatic therapist and a teacher trainer. Today, we are getting real and raw with Lauren, and we're talking all about ADHD. We're talking about neurodiversity. We're talking about parenting, send children, and also being a parent with neurodiversity, with neurodivergence, should I say. So welcome, Lauren, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited about this conversation because, let's face it, parenting is fucking hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yep.
And I think most of you will agree with me. For me, it's one of the best things and the most challenging things as a autistic ADHDer.
Mm-hmm.
So introduce yourself, and let's, delve into your story a little bit and how you can help people and maybe give some people some advice along the way on this podcast as well.
Cool, sounds good. So I'm Lauren O'Carroll. I run Positively Parenting, which is basically I help parents who have ADHD and I help parents who have kids with neurodiversity. So as you know, because you're autistic and ADHD very rarely is on its own.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the parents that I work with will have kids who have ADHD and something else. So I call myself an ADHD parent coach because ADHD is like the common factor.
Uh-huh.
And I want to help parents to raise kids who sort of accept themselves, believe in themselves, have good self-esteem, and can grow up in a way that they don't feel full of shame.
Uh-huh.
And also, I really like, my massive passion is to help parents who are neurodivergent themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I particularly kind of zoned in on ADHD because that is my experience. Mm-hmm. And I think with ADHD, the kind of impulsivity, the lack of frustration tolerance many of us have makes parenting extremely difficult. Yeah. And when I became a parent, so I knew I was ADHD from quite a young age. I was 21 when I was diagnosed, which is young for most females. I think the average age is 36, so 21's like pretty young.
Yeah, so I was 40.
Yeah, that's fairly standard. Yeah. You either, like most people, find out either when they become a parent and they get like, oh my gosh, like I'm no longer just responsible for my own executive function. I've now got to be the executive function of another being. Or when another child comes on board and it's like, even more, or hitting like perimenopause where our estrogen levels drop and our ADHD symptoms increase, or if our kids become diagnosed with ADHD. And now we're being told to, if you're diagnosing a child, I don't think it's actually happening, but like best practice is if you're diagnosing a child, you should also be looking at the parents because it's very genetic.
Because I now look through this lens of understanding neurodivergence because of the research I've done, because of the courses that I've done, and from my own experience. And now I see my whole family and my close friendship group, we are just a big group of neurodivergent people. Yeah. And I don't particularly get on with neurotypicals. Sorry.
We do magnetise to each other. I mean, I must say, since leaving, I worked in the NHS for the last 10 years, and prior to that, I worked in charities. And interestingly, the charity that I worked for was an advocacy charity, and we supported lots of people. It was basically for learning disabilities and mental health, and so there was a lot of like autism within that. ADHD was not really like it was a thing, obviously, and I knew I had ADHD, but it wasn't. We never really supported anyone with ADHD because I guess people with ADHD are not much more able to mask, but I think you can kind of get away with it. I'm saying in inverted commas, more than if you've got sort of level 2, level 3 autism, for instance. So even in that environment, which was an advocacy organisation, I didn't feel like I could really be seen with my ADHD. So it was kind of...
How many years ago was that then, when you were 21? Because that is quite a long
Yeah,
time,
so I'm
isn't
40
it?
now. So
Yeah.
19 years ago, I was diagnosed.
Right, okay.
And actually, when I wasn't like hiding my ADHD when I was working in the charity,
Yeah.
but I was, I actually started a ADHD charity with some other people at that time.
Right. Unbeknown to you that you were ADHD yourself.
Oh no, I knew.
You
then.
knew
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
Right.
So
okay,
I found out I was at university when I got diagnosed.
Right, okay.
And so I was really excited about ADHD and in that zone where you're like, I need to understand everything about it.
Yeah.
So at that point, I started up this charity with some other ADHDers and was also doing my advocacy work. But like nobody there really was very ADHD, or at least not outwardly. And then in the NHS, you absolutely have to kind of conform to being a certain way in order to progress. And as an ADHDer who can't stay in a job for very long, and having this kind of need to prove myself, I was trying to progress. So I was masking all the time. And since I've left work and I've become, self-employed in this in the neurodivergent space, everybody I seem to know is ADHD or ADHD.
So how did that make you feel then, of being in these environments where you had to hide parts of yourself? Because this is a big thing for a lot of neurodivergent people, is that we have to mask to fit in.
Yeah.
And that can be an unconscious thing that we develop.
Yeah.
We're not purposely sort of consciously doing it, going, oh, I'm going to pretend to be somebody else today. But it's something that then we learn from a very young age, isn't it, to mask?
Yes, and I think often we don't notice that we're doing it as well, which is really interesting. Actually, in the charity sector, I coped really well with my ADHD because I was managing advocacy services, so it was kind of in line with my values. I was doing pretty well. I didn't have kids. I could like work extra hours to make, everything get done. It was quite high pressure, and I really liked it. And then there wasn't very much development opportunities. It was like I was a service manager, and to get to director level felt like a massive leap. And I was like, can't get there, but I want to progress. So I moved into the NHS. And when I was there, that's when I started my family. And the NHS is a much more, I guess, conservative environment. It's big. I worked in a big hospital, and so you've got a finance department and an HR department and a this department and a that department, and you kind of have to fit into like a certain type of box in order to keep going. And when I had my first child and I had a year out, that was fine. Then I came back and got a different job, which was I was basically managing the breast unit, which again was great because it was like in line with my values. I was in charge of my time, and that works really well for me. But my daughter was, I think I described her initially. I mean, I found every label for her, and I don't know if that's something that we do as neurodivergent people, or if it's just something that like when you're struggling, you just need to understand why. So, I read all the books. So first she was a high needs baby, then she was spirited, then she was, all of the labels that I could come up with that seemed to fit. But in my heart of hearts, I knew that she was going to be neurodivergent because I am, and I could just feel it. Like,
so what happened? What changed for you when you then had your first pregnancy, your first child?
So I think the big thing, I've always been explosive. I've just got an explosive personality, and that is ridden with shame because I grew up ADHD not knowing it, like many of us. And so, it was always, Lauren, she's so loud. She's so grumpy. She was hit teenagerhood at the age of 6. Like she's so sensitive, all of these things, right? And I felt I got angry very quickly, and that was always kind of almost like a joke as I got older. I'd get furious because I'd drop a pen, and it would just flip me out of whatever I was trying to do. It was almost like an interruption to hyperfocus.
The rage
is how
is
I
real,
understand
right?
it now. But yeah,
the rage is real.
I would see red like that.
And
I did wonder in the back of my mind, but didn't really let myself ponder it too much because I really wanted a kid, how I was going to manage this when I was a parent. And I looked around at all the parents and I thought, well, they all manage it. And I can't be the only female who has this kind of rage. Admittedly, I don't see this kind of rage very often, but people must just hide it, right? Because like everyone must feel this. So when I had my first daughter, I mean, sleep deprivation on top of ADHD was not ideal. She slept for 40 minutes at a time. So that was tough. She was also IVF. So I'd been through like 3 years of fertility treatment. Yeah. I then had, she was measuring small. So I had to have an induction at 36 weeks and like 6 days or something. So she did just fall out of prematurity. But I had like 3 days of induction and then had to have an emergency section. So like none of it was kind of what I was planning, but it was fine. And, you know, I really enjoyed the labouring bit, which is probably quite typically ADHD as well. Like, you know, I'm working towards something and
I know
doing all the things.
I love it's almost like orgasmic when the baby comes out.
Yeah, I didn't experience that bit. But
whoa, of course you had to.
All of the like,
that is
contractions and everything felt very authentic.
Yeah,
and I think that's something that's always felt really good to me, like authenticity and like working hard for something that you really want. But yeah, then she was in NICU for 2 weeks. She struggled to breathe. She was very jaundiced. So when I finally got her home, I got home for 1 day and then we had to go and stay with my in-laws, which I really didn't want to do because I wanted to do it properly, again, in inverted commas. But we had no floor in our kitchen. We had dust sheets up everywhere. Like we hadn't finished doing our house. She was meant to come out at 40 weeks.
So a lot of trauma then around a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Some trauma then around like what you kind of had this vision in your mind about what like I think pregnancy and having a child would be. And
exactly. Like my birth plan was like, we're going to hypnobirth. We're going to like, you know, breathe through it. And I felt really disappointed that I couldn't do it, you know, vaginally. But then having to go to my in-laws for a bit was probably quite a good thing because at least there was someone else to hold my baby. Yeah. Because it was a lot. And of course my husband had finished paternity leave by the time she was out of hospital. Yeah. So yeah, that was a lot, but you know, we got through it. It was fine. Went back to kind of our house, lived that first year very sleep deprived, and looking back I can see that I was probably not very well. I was obsessive about sleep, you know, like tracking every feed, everything. And yeah, she was a child who needed to be held all the time. You know, she would cry if I put her down. So, you know, I don't think I ate a meal sitting down for that entire year.
I think some of these struggles that we go through as mothers, we put so much pressure on ourselves to be perfect, to have everything by the book. You know, I remember my first child, and it wasn't my first pregnancy, but it was my first child that I was having. So I remember having this pregnancy book, and like to the T, I'd be reading it all and be like, right, what's going on now? You know, how's the baby growing? I was like obsessed with it. Yeah. And then like with you, I had this lovely plan, but I got preeclampsia with her. So I had to stay in hospital for 10 days. Wow. And I remember the nurse saying to me, because I was crying, she goes, what are you crying for? I was just like, I just want to go home. And my hands look like sausages because they're all swollen up with this water retention. I was like,
and you're ADHD and you're having to stay in bed.
Oh, I was absolutely just beside myself. And then I was induced. I did, and that was long, but yeah, I had her, and 37 weeks exactly. Yeah. So yeah, and then what came after that was I was trying to be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfectionism as a parent, and you know, sorry other kids, but you know, she was my first, but she got like the best of me, I think, but internally I was so like worried and stressed all the time.
Yeah, and I don't think my daughter did.
How was that for you?
Yeah, I don't think she did get the best of me. I think my second did,
Oh,
even though my second was born in France at 33 weeks. Yeah. Following a placental abruption, and you know that was a really traumatic birth. And she was in NICU for 4 weeks, and she flew in a helicopter on day 2 of her life to another hospital because she needed extra breathing equipment. And then we flew a private jet home to England after 2 weeks to get her into another NICU so that we could be at home. So her birth was like, that was a lot. And my dad was dying at the same time. So that was horrendous.
Because being a mum, we're expected to just do all of this other stuff as well. Yeah. It's not like you know, tribes or anything like that anymore, where it takes a village to raise a child. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I felt kind of really alone. Yeah. And then I found those parent groups really cliquey. Yeah. And I just felt like, you know, my life completely changed. I was 19. Yeah. And it just that's tough. Changed from, you know, and I owned pubs. So it takes a very different very different lifestyle to just being with this baby. Yeah. How did you feel about loneliness and stuff like that?
I was lucky in that 2 of my best friends had babies at the same time. So we hung out quite a lot. Actually, 3 of my my local really close friends had babies at the same time. So one of them I did long walks with. Yeah. So for every nap for Anouk, my eldest, I would walk because she wouldn't sleep otherwise. So she'd either be in the sling or in a buggy. And I need exercise. Like I'm a very hyperactive ADHD, so I need exercise. So you know, for me, it would be like 3 long walks a day. Yeah. When she was very little, which really helped my mental health. Then when she got a bit older, I went to a gym which had a creche. So she went into creche, and I could go to the gym, and then we'd hang out on the soft play, and I'd have some lunch with a friend of mine who, you know, was similar to me in outlook and whatever. So that was quite nice, actually. The beginning of my day was quite nice. Then I'd drive home for lunch. She'd sleep in the car. I'd probably drive up and down the A roads for that entire nap so that she'd stay asleep obsessively for 45 minutes for the sleep window. And then the afternoons would drag. Like, I hated being in the house with her because I was just like, I don't know what to do with her. Like, I feel like I need to entertain her and I don't know how. Okay. So I found that really hard. But I didn't do that many baby groups, to be honest. I think I got away with that. I was quite lucky. And by the time I had my second, I had a lot of mum friends who were kind of related to, so that was easier.
When did you start to notice then that your own children could be or were neurodivergent?
Oh, like from very, very... I mean, I think I always expected it. Yeah. But with my eldest, she was just such a... I guess high needs. Like, she just would always need to be held. I think also there's something about the nervous system, you know, the hypervigilant nervous system, which neurodivergent people tend to have. Some of that I feel like I've given her because I was very hypervigilant, as you described. You were too. Yeah. I think with our first, we're often like that. Yeah. And I think she picked up on a lot of that. So how much of
we do when we're in the womb. Yeah. Our parents, our mother's nervous system. We just we actually start responding to that from when we're when we're a fetus and our own nervous system starts growing. So it is generational, like that. If we've been
looking like
out.
At my mother and my grandmother, like it's the same pattern. But I think also, you know, once she was out and like just the levels of stress that she was like, you know, her mirror neurons were picking up from mine was a lot, and I think that will have affected how her brain developed. So I have to be really careful not to shame myself for that and, you know, be self-compassionate because, you know, I did the best I could. Yeah, and I think we all do. Yeah. But the rage when she wouldn't sleep or when she'd wake up or when the bloody doorbell would ring or when I was walking down the street and a dog would bark or somebody would slam a car door, like I would be so angry with these people. Maybe not externally, but I would be like, you. And I'd be swearing under my breath at someone. For closing a car door, like, come on, it's reasonable if you're getting out your car to shut the door. But
exactly, But in our heads and how we're feeling,
can you not see my baby is sleeping? Shut it quietly.
Because that's what I think that's because we're so in desperate need of that peace and quiet. Because we need to zone out. Yeah. We need to woosah, and when you have a child, it's hard to do that. I remember. When I've got 4 children, Right? And I remember when 2 of mine were little, they'd be put to bed and they would be sleeping all right. And then it would be like my time.
Yeah.
So I would then stay up late
and
they'll be drinking because I was like, I need to reclaim some of my time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened for me.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of other parents I've spoken to sort of do that. It's like, oh, let's just sit down now, get a glass of wine, because that then helps to actually then calm the nervous system that you've been on alert all day. And also help to relieve the stress. But it's counterproductive because we all know that alcohol does not relieve stress. It's a very temporary solution to, and it actually makes you feel worse.
Yeah, 100%. And I've actually really noticed that, like, when I'm putting my kids to bed, because still, you know, my kids are 6 and 8 now.
Okay.
Bedtime still takes at least 2 hours.
Okay.
It's a full-on, you know, we're going in, and I alternate with my husband, but of course when he puts the kids to bed, it's even more work for me because I'm sorting out downstairs and then I have to come up and say goodnight for another hour.
Yeah.
It's always fun. But yeah, if I have a drink at bedtime, I am not regulated at all. Like, I have to be really, really mindful that, like, I don't have a drink. If we're having dinner, if we're having a family dinner, it's like, I really don't want to drink at that time because I just know that bedtime will be horrific.
I just don't drink now, full stop.
Yeah. I mean, I don't drink much, to be honest. And I think since going back on ADHD medication, I found it a lot easier not to drink. I just don't want to. I do drink a bit, but I find that I have the kind of personality, or the kind of I don't know what it is, where if I go into an environment where there's lots of drinking sort of every day, then I will slot into that. Like, you know, when I go to stay with my mum, for instance, she has a drink every night, and I just get very used to that. But a lot of it for me is having that glass of wine, and I'll notice that actually I don't necessarily want to drink it, but then I'll fall into that kind of normality, and I will be drinking. Then I'll want to drink when I get home.
But I find, mimic, don't we?
And our bodies get used to it very quickly, and kind of we sort of think, okay, I'll have a drink now. And I think it's also a way of coping with stress, as you say. And you know, my mum has a very anxious disposition, and that makes me very anxious when I'm with her, and that makes me want to drink. That's the time I want to drink more than really when I'm at home. When I'm at home, I'm much better able to regulate myself, and that's taken a lot of work. And one of the tools that I have is probably not drinking without even really thinking about it. And I think having a hyper focus, or having something else that you're interested in, like for me, it's my work and it's fitness. Like, I want to get up in the morning, go to the gym. So I want that more than I want to drink.
Same. Just doesn't fit into my lifestyle.
No. Anymore. Whereas before when I was like teenager, early 20s, all I wanted to do was drink. You know, like, same. I was not interested in being fit. So
I was, because I'd do like yoga and stuff in the day. I know I'd horse ride and stuff like that, but then I'd be pissed at night. But me, I'm a binger. I've always been a binger of everything. So, like, for me, it's just, I just don't start because I don't stop.
No, and I would say the same, actually. Like, I get to a point in drinking, and then it's like, you can forget it. But that happens very rarely to me, because I hate hangovers and I get them badly.
God,
But and actually sometimes when I allow myself to do that now, and it's probably about once every 2 years, I'm like, oh, this is fun. I'd forgotten about this.
Then you're like, the next
it's not
5 days, 5-day hangovers for me now. I can't do it. I just think, there's no point. But it served me well. I feel it served me well, or that maybe that's the lie that I told myself at the time. I was self-medicating. But you know, and to cope with being a parent, and I had my second daughter, and then soon after that, I was a single parent with a full-time job in sales, and a house to run and a car, and you know, from the outside, I had it all together. You know, I was fairly young, you know, quite good looking. I had a nice car, nice big house. I had a good, well-paid job. But at night, I'd shut all the doors and I'd drink 3 bottles of wine. And behind, you know, in secret, and be really fucking lonely. And MySpace was out then. And I would go into my little converted area, like office area, and I would sit on MySpace drinking, just talking to people because I needed connection because I've been masking all day at work and like very outwardly selling and, you know, putting on a performance, so to speak. It would be like, right, I need to just let go. And that was my way of self-medicating. It's only in hindsight and looking back that I understand what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Now I understand it from a neurodivergent lens.
Yeah.
I've been able to release a lot of shame, been able to forgive myself and be like,
I get it.
That's why. And how do you feel about that kind of those aha moments that you've sort of seen in your own journey and you see with other people of like, it's almost like it's okay.
Yeah. So I feel that very much with rage, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we often call it like mum rage.
Yeah.
And I hate that that's a term, but I think it is a thing because I think we hold a lot of resentment. And I think when you're neurodivergent and you've been masking and you start to unmask, I think that resentment shifts and changes and it gets really big. So whenever I feel like anybody is criticizing me for something related to the way that my brain works, oh my God, I explode. I get so cross because I just find it so ableist, so discriminatory, and I feel like you should be on my side here, like you should be supporting me, and you're not. And people don't even do it intentionally. But it's like if someone triggers my RSD,
so RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, it is a real or perceived reaction to rejection. And it can be very subtle. The rejection can be very subtle, but it feels massive.
And I think also, and I think I've heard you talking to other people on your podcast about this, our intuitive kind of our noticing, being able to read the room, being able to read what people are thinking. It's not even necessarily something they've said, but somebody might take a step backwards when you start speaking and you're like, whoa, I've been too loud. Oh my God. Like suddenly you're really noticing yourself and you become like very self-critical. And so all of that feels huge. And then if somebody says something, it can only be perceived as critical. So, it feels like somebody's just like put a big sign on your head saying failure.
And I didn't understand that until I understood my ADHD. And I'm very rude and blunt, so people say. But I just say it like it is. To me, you've always said it like it is. Spade's a spade. Me. Direct communication is how I communicate. I don't get it when other people don't do it. So it's like, well, you said that's what you were going to do. So that's what I thought you meant. So that's for me is then I got a lot of feeling of being let down. Because, well, they said they were going to. So you put all your hopes into that and think, oh, you just rely on someone to do that. And when you get let down, I think then that's quite isolating because you think everyone's just going to let me down. And with the RSD, it's like I feel that has held me back a lot in certain areas of my life. Or if I've gone, because I have the confidence, probably delusional of it, but I've been very, very confident since I was very little in some areas. But I think that's more of a performance in some ways as well. But so if I started something new and I was quite good at it, but then somebody said something, I wouldn't want to do it anymore. I'm like, no.
Oh, hang on, you're watching me?
Like, and then that's why I've done so many different things.
And I think the other thing is that we're often, because we're very good at reading the room, we assume that other people, before we understand our brains at least, we assume other people can do that too. And I think even though I do understand my brain and I understand what a neurotypical brain would look like in comparison, I still sort of expect my husband to be able to read me. And then when he doesn't, I feel offended. I'm like, well, why are you not making the effort to notice that I look tired and stressed and that I am indicating by my actions that I need your support? You know, like, why are you not noticing that I am carrying the lion's share? And unfortunately, women do still, they do tend to, a relationship or a family in which there is a mother figure and a father figure and 2 kids or 3 kids or however many kids, does seem to be the female who takes the sort of the mental load, I don't know, I think we just do more. I really do.
Yeah.
And I think that and becoming aware of that, plus being aware of like how your brain affects what you do and how much harder it still is for you, can create a lot of resentment, which can then build that rage. And I think that we feel then a lot of shame because women aren't supposed to be rageful, right? And we're not supposed to shout at our kids, and we're not supposed to even be physically aggressive with our kids.
But the shouting and that comes from the repression.
Of course,
like, I'm a somatic therapist, and I work with a lot of rage release with my clients, and and that's something in my own personal journey that I had to allow that to come through, and boy, does that feel good.
Yeah, but it's hard
healthy
to do.
Rage release.
I find that very hard to do with anyone. So I've tried to do this a lot with my therapist,
right?
But because I'm a masking ADHD, I've worked with my therapist for like nearly 2 years now. Yeah. I probably feel the safest I feel with anyone with her. But still, for me to properly let go of rage is a step too far. Like, it feels so unsafe to my nervous system because you don't show that vulnerability. You don't show that side of you unless you have no choice. So when my kids trigger me, like, they've seen it, but I couldn't put it on, right? Like, and for her to try and trigger my rage, like, everything in me is going, don't do it, don't let, you're in an environment which isn't, so she would have to make me really, really angry for me to properly we've touched on it, we skirt around it.
That's why breath work is amazing for that.
Yeah.
Because it just switches off all of that other stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's so powerful,
breath
isn't
work,
it?
is absolutely amazing for that, because there's no hiding from it. It does sometimes with some people take a few times, because again, without creating safety in your own body and your own nervous system, you won't be able to access those emotions that are however deep they're held. I mean,
I can access the emotions, but I can also access the other emotion, which is like, I can feel my shutters coming up, and I can feel myself just going, all those inner children going like, don't let it out. Don't show your vulnerability. And I think that for me, that's been a really interesting journey. Yeah. Like, even understanding how to unmask, because it's big, right?
I'm still going. I'm, nearly 3 years since I've been diagnosed, and I've been on that sort of that rage release that I was very angry. I didn't understand how angry I actually was at a lot of things, and how much I abandoned myself for other people. Yeah. And that's
100%.
I'm stepping into this year like, nah, fuck that. And I'm kind of like that. I'm like, nah, actually, and some people aren't going to like that.
But then when people reject you because you're doing that, it makes me very angry. I'm like, how dare you?
I'm just going to crack on.
You don't know that I'm doing this.
Yeah.
But how dare you not understand it?
People think there's something wrong with me because I'm not being a good little girl and pleasing and appeasing. Sitting here look pretty. Yeah. No, if you call me out on something, I'm going to stand up for myself. Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. But it's not easy.
And it's allowing that. No, it hasn't been. And I spent 2023 and 2024 grieving a lot. So
which is really important.
Grief comes up a lot for people that are late diagnosed. Even at like 21. Yeah. It's like that's a massive chunk of your life.
Yeah.
It's
half my life still.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That has that you've been masking and even being after told diagnosis, you're too much or this, do that.
Even after diagnosis, it still happens. Just because I understand the ADHD.
Oh God, it still happens. Still all the freaking time.
Yeah. I still get blamed for my ADHD almost every day for something. Yeah. I'm just understand why now, and I get cross about it rather than like feeling.
ADHD has got a lot of stick in the press recently, and in general. And I feel bad about that because I think that's really damaging.
Yeah.
It's stopped me talking a bit about it, not going to lie. It has made me cautious about sort of labelling myself with ADHD.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, how I feel about that. What about somebody who then that stops them getting help?
Yeah.
And then they commit suicide. You know, that's worst case scenario.
Yeah, but I mean, the research is very clear that you know, I think it takes 9 years off a woman's life on average, and I think it's 6 off a man's life. Don't quote me on that.
Women with ADHD or autism are more likely to commit suicide. Yeah, but 5 times more likely. Yeah.
But also just in terms of the stress that we live under, in terms of the coping mechanisms we reach for, and that's untreated ADHD.
Yes,
and I don't think it's not even necessarily treated with medication. But
undiscovered, unsupported, and untreated ADHD. Yeah.
But I would say, even though I was treated and knew I was ADHD from 21, I still was adopting a huge amount of shame through. Well, I still am, to be honest, but I'm much better at not doing it now.
So much shame I hold around my parenting. Yeah. And that's the thing that gets my rage is when someone criticises my parenting. Because that's my wound. That's my biggest wound.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest vulnerability. Right? Yeah, absolutely. So when someone questions that or tries to threaten that, that's when you see the rage come out in me, and I see red, and you know all sorts of things.
I mean, the rage comes out in me all the time, but the public rage outside of my house.
I'm talking public rage.
The times when I would normally hide and try and mirror and fit into the, figure out what was the right thing for me to do, and then do that. That has stopped since having kids, because my in-laws don't agree with how I'm raising my kids, or my parents don't agree with how I'm raising my kids. And let's face it, I describe myself as the least peaceful parent coach you will ever meet, because
this is what I want to talk about, actually.
I talk loud. I'm very open about the fact that I am an explosive parent, but I have learned to become a lot more calm. And I don't advocate explosive parenting. The more peaceful we can be, the better for our kids, for sure.
How do we do that then?
But how do we do that?
How do you do that? What's your method of helping people to become more peaceful?
So I think the first part of it is talking about when you're not peaceful. Yeah. Because if we talk about it, if we put it out there, then we're not stuck in shame. If we don't, if we hide away from it, if we don't talk about it, it's shame, right? It just sits in shame. If we can talk about it, if we can be vulnerable, if we can admit that we screamed at our kid this morning, then that allows us to move on and to actually start to have some self-compassion. We need to apologise to our kids when we get it wrong. Yeah. And again, that's much easier to do when we're not shaming ourselves about it. Yeah. When we can grieve and say, I wish that I hadn't done this. Yeah. And I wish that I hadn't had this life that has made me shameful and react in these ways, then we find it much easier to apologise to our kids.
I had those big conversations with mine. Mine are all older now. So 2 of mine are adults. Yeah. And then the 2 youngest are pretty much both teenagers. Yeah. So it was really freeing. Yeah. Having those conversations.
And I've said to adults, parents. I spoke to 2. I think they were in their 60s. 2 parents, 60s, 70s, who had adult children, and they said, they were on this peaceful parenting course. They're part of this membership. They were trying to kind of learn and grow so that they could help their grandkids. And they were talking about how they parented their children and how they felt so awful about it. And I said, just tell your kids that, because hearing you, all of us on this call were in tears.
I feel now, I can feel it coming. Yeah. It's made me feel quite emotional.
If you can apologise to your kids,
family,
if they can hear you say what you've just said to all of us, it's made all of us 30, 40, 50-year-olds start to cry, because we so want to hear that from our parents.
Yeah, imagine the closure, or imagine. Just the reconnection from that. Yeah. Yeah.
That one
doesn't have to change everything or make it all right. Yeah. It just acknowledgement acknowledging it.
But also, I think that the key here is authentic acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Not just like, sorry, I got it wrong.
Okay.
But like knowing that they have sat with that, that they're working through that, that they really genuinely can see, and they're not just saying it because it's something that they know you want to hear. And I think that's the difference, particularly if this is a neurodivergent child you're talking to. And because most of your audience neurodivergent, we're talking a lot about it. So yeah, probably.
Yeah. Some of the previous episodes are really like helping people now who are realizing only recently discovering that they could be ADHD. So everything is geared around inclusion, whether you are neurodivergent, whether you're not. Like there's something in this podcast that I'm sure everyone could get something out of, from recovery to, narcissistic abuse to neurodivergence. We cover it all.
Yeah. But I would say that like that bit is really important, that kind of owning your mistakes. And we know that we don't need to be perfect. Like the parents who come across as perfect, that's actually putting a lot of pressure on their kids to try and be perfect parents themselves.
So I've seen this a lot, right, is people coming into my space to get therapy from me because of their parents that expect them to be perfect children and achieve all this stuff and try and push them in the direction that they're trying to relive through their kids and push them into this academic and all this stuff. You must get this, you must get that. And then they just feel like they're the most awful person on the planet. And then we've got to go back. Then I'm working with these adults. I'm like, well, now we need to go and reparent your inner child.
100%.
And bring that child home.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of it. It's doing that inner work. I think there's a lot of tools that we can use to help us learn to get to calm. And that you'll be able to use them sometimes, but you won't be able to use them all the time. And I think holding that sort of, I don't need to be perfect. Winnicott's research, which was done in the 60s, I think, is really clear that actually we don't need to be perfect all the time. Our kids need to see us making mistakes. They need to see us repairing from those mistakes that we make so that they can learn to do that themselves. And if we can be, gentle, peaceful, compassionate, empathetic with our kids most of the time, then that's fine.
So what about then if a person is suspecting, oh, I think my child has additional needs? I'm seeing a lot on social media, and a lot of the people in my community are really struggling to get help at the moment for their kids. Me being one of them. Have you got any advice? You're laughing because is it just banging your... Where? Well, is there some signposting, some places that people can try and get at least some support? Because for me, it seems like the school system and the children's mental health system is on its knees, and like there isn't enough to send support
100%.
to support everybody in need.
100%.
So people are getting left. And it's not cool.
And this is the other thing that the other reason why I'm so passionate about doing what I do is because it's ironic really, isn't it? The parents who are ADHD and tend to have, especially mums again, like it's much more likely that you're going to have an ADHD child if you're a mum than an ADHD dad. The parents who have kids with ADHD, well, the parents who are ADHD are more likely to have kids with neurodivergence, whether it's ADHD, autism, mixture, another specific learning disability or difficulty. They're the kids that you have to advocate for, that you have to fight for. And if you don't fight hard, you're not going to get your kids' needs met. It's like another full-time job.
But that's exhausting for someone, for a parent who's also trying to regulate themselves. Yeah, any parent.
But then it's admin, right?
It's admin.
It's so much. It's chasing. It's admin. It's keeping. It just adds so much.
And then it's feeling like you're a pest and a burden to
you've got to work with your own shame about like, I don't want to be a problem. I don't want to be too much.
I don't want to keep asking.
I don't want to be that parent.
Yes.
And you have to be that parent.
I know, but that's really difficult.
Yeah. It's really difficult. And this is why I'm so passionate about it.
That's why we need to do it as a community. We need to do it
100%.
together because, you know, parents that are listening, you're doing your best.
Yeah.
That's one message I want to say.
It is hard.
We all go through these struggles.
Yeah, and it's harder for you if you're neurodivergent too, because all of the things that you've got to do in order to get your child's needs met or your own needs met involve something that we find particularly difficult. That involves a lot of executive functioning skills, which we don't have in abundance, right? We have to fill out form after form after form. We have to chase, we have to chase, we have to chase. We have to put ourselves out of our comfort zones and be annoying and be persistent and be, you know, all of these things which we're kind of like conditioned not to be.
Yeah.
But that would be my message is you are not too much. You are not too loud. Your child is worth it. The fight is necessary to get your child's needs met. And I've heard this from many professionals in this space. The kids who have EHCPs are not the kids necessarily who have the biggest need. They're the kids who've got the parents who have the capacity to fight for them and have the skills and the knowledge. And I think the only way that you can do that without completely losing yourself or burning out, and I speak as somebody who has burnt out and I had to leave, you know, I had to take time off work and all of that because of the pressure all of this was putting on me, because it's not only advocating for your child in school, then your child comes home and they explode because they've been struggling so much in school. So you have a very dysregulated child. And with that comes anxiety, there might come other health conditions. They might start to want to self-harm or worse.
Well,
we've got a lot of stuff that we've got to deal with, which is very emotionally challenging.
I've taken my kid out of school now.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm now a home education parent of my child with additional needs. And it's probably the best thing that I've done for her. And
everyone
myself.
I speak to who's done that has said the same. I'm still too scared. But I think, you know.
Yeah, it's not for everybody. You have to do, there's no right or wrong answer here. You know, we have to do what is right for ourselves, for our child, and that's going to look different for all of us. And, you know, I just want to start ending the podcast conversation today on a positive note, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. You're not alone as a parent. And anything that you'd like to add to that, Lauren?
So I think that is what I was in a very ADHD way trying to get to. Is the only way I think you can do that is with support, is with community, is finding your tribe in whatever way that is.
Where can people find that though?
So the online space is good for that. There's a lot of send groups. Facebook is your friend. Like there are lots of groups. I have my own community where I basically try and give that space for when you're kind of going, I don't know what to do now. Like I need access to all these different experts and all of them are going to cost me thousands of pounds.
God, that's another thing, is the money. So we're going to pop the link to, what's your community called?
Growing Extraordinary Humans.
Growing Extraordinary Humans on Facebook? Okay, so we're going to put that link for you all in the show notes as well, so you'll be able to click on that and directly go into Lauren's community if you feel that you would like support with your...
Actually, sorry, in Facebook it's my ADHD Parent Village, and Growing Extraordinary Humans is my paid community. But
it's the paid community, right? Okay, and then you've got
my ADHD Parent Village on Facebook.
My ADHD Parent Village on Facebook. Get clicking. Get joining if you feel that you need some support and some community. And if you feel you want some support from me, you can click below as well and get into my free community on Facebook, or you can call me directly and book in to understand yourself, and I can be a partner in that journey of self-discovery. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Absolute pleasure.
To That Inner Voice. It's all about, you know, the stuff that goes on in our brains and our and what we say to ourselves. So thank you. I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast today. And I will see you next time on That Inner Voice. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast if there's something on here that you have benefited from. And also if you'd like to ask me any questions, get those in the comments. I've been Jennifer McKenzie, That Inner Voice.